Like it changed my input on game banging. Like I'm from Hoover, I'm still from Hoover. I'm always gonna be from over there. That's where I was born at, raised at, grew up at. Like I can't change that. But what made me look at game banging different, I was like, damn, how many years am I gonna be faithful to this shit and be out here doing so much shit for this game and I ain't gonna get nothing back? Like it's like you start thinking like, damn, I'm being used. Like I'm out here doing all this, nigga. I'm out here doing like if I would have spent all these years in school, nigga, I'd be a brain surgeon or something.
Nigga, hustle. Big shout out to SPI, Spotter Loc. You know I'm in the black box. Had to come through, tap in, show love one time. Yeah, y'all make sure y'all subscribe. Stay tuned. All that.
What you know about Black Indians? FBAs, Black Indians, Aboriginals. I know a little bit. I don't know much. I say, hey, why not learn some more together? So with no further ado, let's see what they say the Black Indians had or have been up to.
Spanish Florida, 1835. The sugar plantations of Florida were among the most valuable in North America. Their owners thought they were untouchable. They were wrong. In April of that same year, something unprecedented happened. 385 slaves would escape their chains and take up arms against their colonial oppressors. But these weren't just any rebellious slaves. They were joining forces with one of the most remarkable communities in American history. A group that had already been living free from the chains of white oppression in the Florida wilderness for decades. The Spanish called them Cimarron, the Wild Ones. History would know them as the Black Seminoles. What happened next was so extraordinary that a U.S. general would write to the War Department. This, you may be assured, is a Negro, not an Indian war. This group was led by a man named John Horse, and they would accomplish something that had never been done before, forcing the United States government to negotiate with former slaves. This is the story about a people who built their own free society right under the nose of the plantation system.
I wonder why when the Redskins was searching for a name, why they just couldn't go Seminoles or something. Well, I guess whatever committee that didn't like Redskins probably vetoed all that too.
A story about former slaves who became generals. A story so threatening to the power structure that it's been systematically left out of your history books. You probably know Florida as America's sunny vacation paradise, but in the 1700s, it wasn't even part of the United States. See, while Britain controlled what we now call the American colonies, places like Georgia and South Carolina, Florida belonged to Spain. And this created a situation that would change the lives of thousands of enslaved people. In the British colonies, particularly South Carolina and Georgia, slavery was the backbone of the economy. Vast rice plantations ran on the brutal labor of enslaved people, particularly the Gullah people, who had special knowledge of rice cultivation from their African heritage. But just across the border lay Spanish Florida. And here's where it gets interesting. The Spanish had a unique strategy with Florida. They claimed it, but they didn't want to settle it. Instead, they used it as a buffer zone between the British colonies and their own valuable settlements further south. Their plan was simple but effective. Keep Florida a dangerous, wild frontier. Think about it. What better way to protect your settled territories than to have an untamed wilderness filled with people who have every reason to resist British expansion? And they came up with an ingenious plan to do it. The Spanish crown made an announcement that would send shockwaves through the British colonies. Any slave who managed to escape to Florida would be given their freedom. Not only that, they would be protected by Spanish law. Now,
Imagine they really had to make laws, legislate, and fight to get it changed about slavery. That's crazy.
Florida wasn't exactly paradise. It was a harsh wilderness of dense jungles and malaria-infested swamps. I'm sure if you visited before, you know exactly what I mean. Most Europeans considered it completely uninhabitable. But for people living under the brutality of slavery, these dangers seemed like a small price to pay for freedom. And so they ran, through swamps and wilderness, risking everything for a chance at freedom. The Gullah people, with their knowledge of rice cultivation and tropical agriculture, were particularly well suited to survive in this harsh environment. By the late 1700s, something remarkable was happening in the Florida wilderness. These escaped slaves weren't just surviving, they were thriving, building entire villages, communities with thatched roof houses surrounded by fields of corn and swamp rice. They were creating the first legally sanctioned free black towns in North America. But they weren't alone in this wilderness. Oh no, far from it. Various Native American groups, people who would later become known as the Seminoles, had also made Florida their home. Like the escaped slaves, they too were seeking freedom from colonial expansion. What happened next was unprecedented. These two communities, escaped slaves and Native Americans, formed an alliance that would reshape American history. The story of the Black Seminoles is one of strength, defiance, and a refusal to be broken. But too many people have never even heard of them. If you think more people need to know this untold history, make sure to like this video and drop a comment. What part of the Black Seminoles story shocked you the most? The Black Seminoles, as they came to be known, maintained their own
And those striped outfits look out of the norm for everything else they wear. I wonder if that's just a black and white photo and actually colors. Probably so, yeah.
villages, while forming close ties with their Native American neighbors. The Americans called them Seminoles, a word that came from cimarron in Spanish. It meant wild or untamed. It was an insult. But these people embraced their situation and their freedom. And what emerged in those swamps and forests was something entirely new.
Sound like the same plight of the N-word. Meant to be an insult, then they took it and stuck it and made it something powerful. I can't say we made the N-word nothing powerful, but you get the point. It's something that's kind of powerful.
A society where former slaves and Native Americans coexisted and thrived, free from the influence of the white man. While they formed a close alliance with the Seminole Indians, they maintained their own separate villages and communities, their own distinct identity, their own way of life. The Seminoles practiced a unique religion, a powerful blend of African and Christian rituals with traditional Seminole dances woven in. They even developed their own language, an English Creole that carried echoes of their Gullah roots. Now, technically, the Black Seminoles were considered slaves to the Seminole Indians. But if you're thinking about the brutal chattel slavery of American plantations, think again. Their only obligation was a small percentage of their harvest, paid once a year. That's it. No overseers, no chains, no whips. They lived in their own villages.
So why would they still be classified as slaves? What would be the other? I don't get it. Were they still? I don't get it.
Controlled their own lives, and kept their own wealth. But perhaps their most valuable role was as bridge builders. The Black Seminoles became crucial interpreters, not just of language, but of cultures. They helped the Seminoles understand both the language and the mindset of the European Americans. In a world of increasing conflict, this knowledge was power. And prosper they did. Through farming, hunting, and trade, they built significant wealth. These weren't hidden camps of fugitives. These were thriving communities of free people. But their very success made them a target. Picture yourself as a southern plantation owner in Georgia or South Carolina. Just across your border, there's a community of free, armed Black people.
Sound like Black Wall Street. Here come that wicked white man once again.
They're prosperous, they're organized, and worst of all, they're proving that your entire system of slavery is a lie. Every successful harvest, every newly built home, every armed Black Seminole standing proud and free was a direct challenge to the myth that Black people needed to be enslaved. And as more and more slaves escaped south to join these communities, the slave owners' fear turned to rage. They would soon learn that trying to destroy this free Black society would come at a terrible price, because the Black Seminoles hadn't just built a new society, they had built an army. The success of the Black Seminoles had created an impossible situation for the American slave system. Free Black communities armed and prosperous, living just across the border? Something had to give. As more and more runaway slaves and renegade Indians escaped south, the Seminole settlements in Spanish Florida grew larger. Conflict with the Americans became inevitable. The first clashes came in 1812 and 1816. And in 1817, America decided they had enough. In December of that same year, General Andrew Jackson was given command of U.S. forces in the area. By spring, he was leading an American army into Florida with one mission in mind: to claim the territory for the United States. But that was just the official story. Jackson himself would later call this the Indian and Negro War. And that second part, Negro, that wasn't just an afterthought. These free black communities weren't just a threat to the plantation system. They were living proof that everything the slave owners claimed about black people was a lie. When Jackson's army came, the Black Seminoles and their native allies didn't run. They stood their ground, and they fought back. What followed
Just like they did in Haiti against the French.
was a series of brutal engagements. In November 1817, U.S. soldiers attacked the Seminole village of Foultown. The Seminoles retaliated, laying siege to a boat carrying reinforcements to Fort Scott. 43 men, women, and children lost their lives.
He said that like that was a lot, which it is a lot. Any life lost, it's a lot. But you know how it go now in war, hundreds and thousands. It's crazy. 43 people.
When Jackson's forces swept through Florida in the spring of 1818, they left a path of destruction. Village after village was razed to the ground. But Jackson didn't stop there. He seized the Spanish military post at St. Mark's, then captured the Spanish-held town of Pensacola itself. Jackson's unauthorized military campaign had far-reaching consequences. Spain, realizing it couldn't defend its territory, agreed to negotiate. In 1819, they signed the Transcontinental Treaty, ceding Florida to the United States. But this wasn't the end of the Black Seminoles' fight for freedom.
The U.S. is the biggest gangsters on the map. They try to be the morale police when it comes to morality and integrity. Yeah, they gotta have something coming back to America. I don't see how they could escape it.
In fact, it was just the beginning. By 1835, tensions had reached a breaking point. The U.S. government was demanding that all Seminoles, both native and black, be forcibly moved west of the Mississippi. But for the Black Seminoles, this wasn't just about leaving their homes. The government had a special plan for them. They would be returned to slavery. Their response? In April 1835, they launched what would become the largest slave revolt in U.S. history. 385 plantation slaves broke their chains and joined the Black Seminoles. Together, they laid waste to Florida's sugar plantations, some of the most valuable property in North America. Among their leaders was a warrior named Osceola. Under his command, the resistance would reach new heights of strategic brilliance. On December 28, 1835,
This is why Kanye saying slavery seemed like a choice is out of pocket. They fought and fought. They just couldn't be victorious until they were.
they demonstrated just how deadly they could be. As Major Francis Dade led more than 100 soldiers from Fort Brooke toward Fort King, 180 Seminole warriors launched a devastating ambush. Only 3 soldiers survived what became known as the Dade Massacre. The U.S. military was stunned. General Jessup, the American commander, wrote back to Washington in frustration, "This, you may be assured, is a Negro and not an Indian war." And what a war it was. The Black Seminoles turned Florida's harsh environment into their greatest weapon. They were masters of guerrilla warfare, more adept at fighting in the dense jungle than even their Native American allies. For 7 brutal years, they fought the might of the U.S. military to a standstill. The Battle of Lake Okeechobee in December 1837 saw them inflict heavy casualties, despite being vastly outnumbered. At the Battle of the Loxahatchee River in January 1838, they forced an entire contingent of sailors and soldiers to retreat. But in October 1837, the tide began to turn. General Jesup, realizing he couldn't defeat them in open combat, resorted to treachery. He set up a false truce and captured Osceola along with dozens of his followers.
Y'all, man, everything be in the game. Get tricky. You gotta watch everything. You in the middle of a war. They say let's truce. You go for it, and last thing that was on his mind. That's crazy. That's why when it's on, it's on. Shit.
Still, the resistance continued. For every American soldier who died in battle, 3 more succumbed to disease and the brutal Florida environment. The Black Seminoles knew this terrain. They had made it their home, and now they were using it to bleed the American army dry. By the time it was over, the Second Seminole War would claim the lives of over 1,500 American soldiers and cost the government $20 million. That's over $500 million in today's money.
Still, the way the government of the United States throw money around in Ukraine and everywhere else, there still ain't no money. But that's how they got Florida, huh?
But something strange happened. When the army finally captured the Black Seminole warriors, the officers faced a dilemma. These were no mere runaway slaves, but battle-hardened veterans who had spent years fighting for their freedom. The officers knew that returning these warriors to southern plantations would be dangerous. These people had grown accustomed to freedom and had proven their willingness to fight.
They better not have killed them because of this.
They feared these seasoned fighters would incite revolts across the South. In 1842, after 7 years of brutal warfare, the U.S. government forced the Black Seminoles, along with their native allies, to leave Florida. Their destination? Indian Territory, what we now call Oklahoma. This was the beginning of an exodus that would take these freedom fighters on an epic journey across the continent. In Oklahoma, they found themselves under the authority of the Creek Indians, slave owners who tried to strip away the freedoms they had fought so hard to win. And they faced an even deadlier threat: slave traders who would creep into their settlements at night, kidnapping women and children to sell them into slavery.
We just have no home. We just roam. Nomads. It's so bad. I don't get it, man. It's got to get better one day, man. We shall overcome, y'all. We shall overcome.
For the Black Seminoles, Oklahoma wasn't going to be their promised land. They needed to move again. But this time, they had a leader who would become legendary. His name was John Horse. The Seminoles called him Suanafe Tustanuka. He had risen from slavery to become one of the most feared warriors of the Second Seminole War. Now, he was about to cement his place in history. Horse knew that true freedom wouldn't be found under American rule. Not in Florida, not in Oklahoma, not anywhere in the United States. He had a more radical vision: Mexico, a nation that had already abolished slavery, a place where his people could finally be truly free. But getting there meant crossing hundreds of miles of hostile territory, with Texas slave catchers and hostile tribes standing in their way. In 1850, Horse made his move. Gathering the bravest and most determined of his people, he prepared for what would become one of the most daring freedom rides in American history. They would risk everything on one more journey, this time to Mexico, where slavery was illegal. But even in Mexico, they couldn't escape American aggression. In 1855, a heavily armed band of Texas Rangers crossed the border, determined to destroy their settlement. Big mistake. The Black Seminoles, along with their native allies, didn't just defend their new home. They forced the Rangers to retreat back across the border. Finally, in Mexico,
This why it's okay for Chuck Norris to play Walker, Texas Ranger, straight white boy, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he be tapping into this Indian spiritual side. Cause oh, I get it now.
They found what they had been fighting for all along: true freedom. They built new lives, new homes, and new futures, all on land that was legally their own. But their story wasn't over. In 1870, after the Civil War had ended slavery in the United States, the U.S. cavalry came to them with an offer: return to Texas and join the Army as scouts. Some accepted. They became known as the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts, and they proved to be some of the finest soldiers the U.S. cavalry had ever seen. In 1875, 3 of these scouts did something extraordinary. They won the Congressional Medal of Honor in a single engagement, the highest military decoration in America, awarded to the descendants of runaway slaves. Today, the Black Seminole story lives on in communities scattered across North America. Each carries a piece of this remarkable history. On Andros Island in the Bahamas, you'll find the Black Indians, descendants of those who escaped Florida after the First Seminole War. They were the first to break away, choosing the British Caribbean over American control. In rural Seminole County, Oklahoma, the Seminole freedmen maintained the strongest connection to their past. They're still official members of the Seminole Indian Nation, preserving a unique identity forged in the Florida wilderness generations ago. In the dusty desert town of Nacimiento, Mexico, the Mascogos continue to live on the very land their ancestors defended against the Texas Rangers. Their presence there is a testament to John Horse's daring vision of freedom beyond America's borders. And in Bracketville, Texas, the Scouts live just outside the walls of the old fort where their grandfathers served in the U.S. cavalry, a reminder of how their people eventually turned from fighting the U.S. military to serving within its ranks. In 1978, something remarkable was discovered. Dr. Ian Hancock found that elders among the Texas Scouts still spoke a dialect of Gullah.
Black people always been saying we got Indian. My grandmama part Indian. I'm Black and Indian. That's always Black people said. Never really thought about it, but I guess that's because what their parents was telling them. I ain't gonna lie, they told me my grandmama had some Indian in her. She had some soft hair, and she was from Texas. The Pinkets was their last name, or maiden name, I think.
Same language their ancestors had brought from the rice plantations of South Carolina and Georgia nearly 140 years earlier. 2 years later, researchers made another stunning discovery. The Oklahoma Seminole freedmen also preserved this linguistic connection to their past, with elderly members speaking Gullah and younger generations remembering phrases from their grandparents. But language isn't the only thing they've preserved. In Oklahoma, Black Seminole communities maintain a rich cultural heritage that bridges their African and Native American roots. Even their cuisine tells this story. They still eat rice as a staple, often served with okra or spinach leaf sauce, just like their Gullah ancestors did, and just like their distant relatives in West Africa still do today. What's most remarkable is that many of these communities had lost contact with each other over the generations. Some didn't even know about their connection.
Oh, George Foreman, huh? Ali, boom my head. I think that's George Foreman. If that ain't George Foreman, y'all clown me in the comments. I'm just saying.
To the Gullah people of South Carolina and Georgia. Yet they all held on to the memory of their ancestors' extraordinary fight for freedom in the Florida wilderness. The story of the Black Seminole is more than just a story about escape from slavery. It's about people who dared to build their own free society when everyone said it was impossible. People who fought against overwhelming odds to defend that freedom. People who never stopped believing in their right to live as free human beings. It's a lesson in what's possible when people refuse to accept the limitations others place on them. And that same spirit of resistance didn't die with the Black Seminoles. Decades later, another young leader rose up with that same fearless determination to fight for his people's freedom. Fred Hampton. His vision for Black liberation was so powerful that the U.S. government saw him as a threat. If you want to know how they tried to silence him and why his legacy still inspires revolution today, click here to watch.
Yeah, that. Send your troops, cause we get busy, we don't play about shit. Let the busters off the hook and catch the big fish. Yeah, that. Send your troops, cause we get busy, we don't play about shit. Let the busters off the hook and catch the big fish. Patron with the lemon twist, just hit a big lick. All in Vegas got me feeling like a rich crib. Hold on, same jersey, I ain't never switched. Stay at the gun range, I promise I don't never miss. I dare a nigga to pull up on my passenger seat. The block full of hot boys, it's like 400 degrees. Been gangbanging since a juvenile. Check the files, it's gonna be some shit you gon' see that make it hard to smile. Like Pac said, a whole lot of bloodshed, it's part of war. Like UPS, show up at your door, special delivery. Mac with the shoulder strap, feeling like it's 10 of me. Bomb cushion Hennessy in my system, that chopper got distance. No James Bond, but I'm back on my mission. My uniform be the Michigan, counting money. And ain't gon' post it on my Snapchat to count funny. Hell no, I know my mathematics, being public. They always ask me if I'm still rapping, still crippin'. I ain't no rapper, better check my status. Show up at the meetings, phone season be the reason. Baby mama still can't believe that nigga stop breathing. We don't wanna get even, we tryna get over. It's war with the enemies, but with the homies, squabble from the shoulder. I hit a lick and pass, call my loc like nigga we up. Feeling like Kobe in the last game. Cause I go hard in the clip. These niggas mutts, I hang with pit bulls and Rottweilers. Type to squabble up and bomb on niggas like Deontay Wilder. That 40 bark and they get louder and louder. Shot spotters going off. The neighbors waking up and coming out of their houses. Yeah, this shit fucked up. That's just how the ball bounce. Shooting dice for 4 hours and smoked up a whole ounce. Pop the top off the Remy, feeling like that Charger with the Hemi. Squabble good, losses I can't name any. Chin up, chest out. Niggas just be chasing clout. Better use that GPS, I make a nigga switch routes. Free the tiny match like Baby Psych and Bad News. Hurt my motherfucking soul when I heard that bad news. Shining with a rollie on, smash like Donkey Kong. Every time we went on them missions, we brought a trophy home, a lonely road. Nightmares that the homie told, cause I fucked the bitch that he loved, and I ain't even know it. I've been through so much pain, but I don't even show it. Don't ask me if I want some get back, nigga, you know it. It's part of war. Show up at your front door. It's part of war. What the fuck you think we do it for? It's part of war. Little homies trying to up the score. It's part of war. My nigga, we love war.
Niggas spent all these years on the block. Niggas spent all these years on the block and ain't got nothing to show for it. And then what a nigga do got to show, a nigga got on my own. So what I need you niggas for? Now I start to look at y'all like enemies. So in our reality, like I said, we gotta humble ourselves and we gotta come together, man. We gotta love each other. Cause that's what it's really about. Cause man, black people, if we got the strongest, we the strongest. Like in jail, nigga, on God, they separate us. It's 14 blacks to 72 Mexicans in there. And I told the police, I said, why y'all put us in there with all these Mexicans? They said because that's how it break down. Like that's how y'all can handle them.
Yeah. Snake Wood and that Hustle. Big shout out to SPI, Spotter Loc. You know I'm in the black box. Had to come through, tap in, show love one time. Yeah, y'all make sure y'all subscribe. Stay tuned. All that.